Hey folks, Azure Cosmos DB TV. I'm Mark Brown, and I'm joined by two special guests this week, Sajeet and Aman. And this week we're going to talk about the new JavaScript SDK 4.0, which just went GA. Did we do that at Build, you
Yeah,
guys?
it was a build. Yep.
At Build. So I remember when this came out in preview last year. I can't remember. Was that Ignite? Sajeet, what time? When did that come out? Or maybe it
It
was
was
earlier.
exactly at Ignite in 2023. It was exactly 1.5 years before. Yeah, that was in
Oh, it was
preview.
23. Okay, so we had a long preview period for
Yes.
this year. You want to talk about that for a few minutes, or
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the session is about. So we had a lot of customers giving feedback about the features that we launched, and some of the features that we have to wait till the features get GA. Yeah, and we changed some query pipeline design that had taken much more time than we expected, but right now it's more stable, and we are seeing the adoption like more than 55% of the customers already started using V4 in GA
oh,
in
really?
production. So yeah.
Wow, that's unlike our .NET SDK, where people are just kind of they just pin to like older versions of our SDK, and it's like pulling teeth to get them to upgrade. It doesn't sound like we have the same problem with the
Yeah.
JavaScript SDK, right? People are more likely to
That's
want to.
mainly because of the fact that we have introduced a lot of new features, starting with hierarchical partition key when we like launched in preview. I think that had a lot of adoption
Got
for
it.
most of the customers using. Yeah,
Okay. So, and hey, we're doing a quality bar here, not a time one, right? In terms of releases. So, customers should feel happy about that, right?
yeah,
Developers.
definitely.
Yeah, cool, man. We're hitting the bar. So, all right, let's dive into everything that's new, Saji, with our new JavaScript SDK 4.0.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Just to set the context, we announced this version of the JavaScript SDK in stable at Build this year. And today we will be covering some of the major features in detail with the demo to understand how these concepts works and also to understand how you can implement in your applications. With that, let me jump into the slides. To introduce myself, I'm a product manager in the Azure Cosmos DB team, working mainly on the developer experience. Yeah, I own the JavaScript SDK. So if you have any feedbacks related to JavaScript SDK or even on the desktop tooling, you can reach out to me. And I also have Aman from the engineering team. He's also a developer on the JavaScript SDK. Aman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Aman, and I've been part of this team for almost 2.5 years now, and we have taken a long way. I mean, all the way from 3.17 that we had, and now we are like in the GA of this V4 version. So, I mean, I've been involved in most of the features and the tasks that we have done. But yeah, great. Feels good to be here.
I like your
Yeah,
title tag. They're all in JavaScript. That's very, very nice. So if I have an OOF message, it's JSON, right? That looks like it's JSON out of our data explorer. You guys should do the same when you're OOF. Just plug in some like a JavaScript into your OOF message there. Just
yeah, I think JavaScript developers love JSON, like when we
yeah.
want to play with
Yeah.
web application.
Well, there you go. You can
I think
copy mine then if you want.
definitely, Mark. Yeah, just to start up, today's goals would be to introduce Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. Some of you might be very new if you're watching for the first time. So I will talk about why you need to use JavaScript SDK for Cosmos DB, and then I will dive into some of the important features that we announced at V4 with the JavaScript SDK. And Aman will be doing a live demo with some of the capabilities that we announced with V4. And if you have any questions, post them in the chat or we can take them as we go along. Um, yeah, just to start or set the context, as developers, we want simplicity and also speed and scalability without spending much hours in setting up in order to build any application, right? As a developer, I have come across these struggles when I wanted to build my application. So if you are facing any of these factors, slow setup, performance issues, or even if you want to build your applications with any SDK, the SDK has to be simpler, and also it should be in a way to understand easily, right? So um, we have introduced the Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK way long before, and right now we are improving a lot on these factors, especially with Cosmos DB capabilities and also in order to make sure that developers can easily get started. Yeah. So these are some of the important factors that we addressed. This is where you can make use of Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. Imagine an SDK that lets you to set up globally distributed serverless database that can scale unlimitedly with just few lines of JavaScript. That's what we are going to enable through the JavaScript SDK, and a lot of customers are building agentic apps with our JavaScript SDK because it supports some of the native AI capabilities that we introduced since last year. Just to kickstart, there are multiple ways to interact with Azure Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB, as you know, we support REST, we support GraphQL, and we also have native SDKs to directly talk to Cosmos, starting with .NET, Java, Python, JavaScript, and Golang. Also, there are developer tools such as VS Code extension, which you could leverage to talk to Azure Cosmos DB. When it comes to developer experience, SDK comes as the first priority, right? As we all know, SDK provides a simplified integration and efficient developer experience that abstracts the platform capabilities. So Azure Cosmos DB has various range of SDK, and given that JavaScript is widely adopted in the community, and it's still the number one language when you consider developers, right? This is probably the most complete developer experience when it comes to SDKs. We have a lot of choices, and today we will be highlighting the JavaScript SDK. If you are wondering like why you should choose JavaScript SDK, starting with it's fully open source. So any work that we do on the SDK is completely feedback-driven development. And even if you go to our GitHub repo, you can see the projects that we are driving based on the milestone. You can see the features that we are going to adapt to each milestone. So if you have any feedback or if you have pain points, you can directly comment on those so that we can prioritize them easily. And again, OSS development practices. So unlike any other OSS repos, we are maintaining the standards. So if you open any issues, there would be immediate response. And we are also following some of the tagging mechanism in order to align with the SDK development as well. Again, as I mentioned, project management happens through GitHub. So you are feel free to open any issues, or if you want to open an RFC on specific feedback, there are some cool cool feedbacks that we got in the past on supporting some of the mobile experience, and those are in the roadmap that we will be taking in. And then it follows Fluent API design. We support async method backend version 3, and we are trying to improve most of the common TypeScript practices with the latest version as we adopt. Even with the latest version 4.0 across Azure Cosmos DB or across Azure SDKs, JavaScript SDKs, we have implemented to support ESM modules so that you can import any version of the JavaScript SDK without using specific tags. So you can import Azure Cosmos and then mention the SDK version. It will directly import the particular version. You don't have to go to package JSON and then add the specific version and so on. And then, yeah, again, simplified syntax and async iterators are supported. And we also introduced a new sample mechanism. So whenever we introduce a new feature, if you go to the repo, you could find before or whatever the specific version. And then if you go to the samples, you can see whatever the features that we launch, we will have a equivalent sample published in the samples repo. So that would give the flexibility to get started with things easily. And as I mentioned, enhanced developer experience. You can easily set up this SDK with one npm install command that happens with any other SDKs that you would use. And then we also expose some of the user-friendly methods. If you're using the naming standard, if I have to mention, if you're using any specific features related to Cosmos DB, you can follow the same naming standard that are exposed through the methods. And also, it highlights the benefits of TypeScript, so you don't have to do type checking. And also, I mean, even if you go to the npm stats, you would see Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK is ranked as the #1 among all databases with the score of 97. So that standard we are maintaining over the past few years. And then we're also following user-centric design changes. So any changes that we are doing on the SDK, it has to align with all other SDKs that we have. So we make sure that what are the new changes that we introduce, it doesn't, it goes in align with other SDKs, starting with any feature that we introduced even in V4. Yeah, with that, I would like to also talk about some of the customer usage where this Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK is being used. Yeah, on daily basis, you use Azure Cosmos DB Data Explorer that is powered by Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. Again, the emulator, if you're using both vNext as well as our classic emulator, you would see that Data Explorer that is also powered by Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. And if you're using the VS Code extension, that is also powered by Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. These are some of the internal tools that we use within Cosmos DB to um, I mean, to enhance the developer experience. And if you look at some of the community packages that that have been launched very recently, starting with Nest.js, which is one of the widely used backend framework. And there is a package called Azure Databases that is also built using JS, and it has good community adoption in the last few years. And they also upgraded to V4 SDK, and it has been stable for the last couple of months. And also NoSQL Studio, which is one of the extension that was built by one of our MVPs that uses the JavaScript SDK. And the GraphQL connector, which was built by Hasra, one of our partners, it's also using JavaScript SDK. And again, the Cosmos X, which is ORM way to interact with Cosmos DB that was recently launched by one of the community member that was also built using Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. So there is good JavaScript ecosystem of developers or the community being adopting to JavaScript SDK, given that we are also following all the native features of the Cosmos DB, as well as we are also maintaining the momentum by getting the feedback from the community. So that's kind of the evolution of the JavaScript SDK. And if I have to talk the history, yeah, we launched back in 2018, starting with V1, and over the period of years, you can see the changes that we made. I wouldn't dive into each of these in the past, but if you see the JavaScript V4, which we launched again in Ignite 2023, and we got really good feedback from customers, and we have improved some of the features that customers have wanted, and right now we have made it stable at build. So that's what I'm going to cover in the next slide. There are a bunch of features that I have not included here, but these are mainly the customer facing, or like customers who have given good feedbacks that we have improved based on the feedback. So starting with efficient bulk operations, this has been ongoing effort over the past 6 months, and we have introduced the V4 SDK, which supports uh, bulk operation. Earlier, we had limitations when you want to execute bulk. It doesn't support more than 100 operations, but we don't have such limitations with the V4 GA version. It's ideal for high throughput scenarios like data migration or data ingestion, and developers can send multiple operations in a single request by reducing the latency, and also it improves performance. Yeah, I will not dive into detail, but Aman will be showing a live demo of how you can build or ingest data using the bulk feature. And again, when we talk about any SDK, AI comes as the first priority. We have adhered to all the um, AI capabilities that Cosmos DB support. So we support hybrid search, full text search, and vector search, which was launched in preview. And right now we have made it stable as well. So developers can build intelligent AI application that can combine traditional filters as well as semantic understanding using the AI native AI capabilities that Azure Cosmos DB supports. And the other feature, the change feed, which has been which we have got feedback from customers to support on the JavaScript SDK. So built-in change feed listeners allowed up to react to document changes in real time. And we also support, all the versions that are supported in other SDKs. That is a full model. And also we support the deletion, which was launched in preview a couple of months back. So this is ideal for scenarios like event-driven applications, data syncing, and also analytical pipelines. And the other one, which is mainly from enterprise customers, that we have got feedback to support client-side encryption. So security is one of the key priority for us, and we have introduced the client-side encryption with JavaScript SDK. So you can define and manage encryption keys and enforce encryption policies at the container level, ensuring the data stays protected even before it leaves the client. So this is a really good feedback that we got from customers, and we have addressed it, and we will show a demo on that as well. And finally, this has been there for almost 1.5 years, diagnostic support, but we keep on improving because it deviates from some of the like powerful capabilities that .NET and Java support, but we are getting customer feedback and trying to improve the diagnostic support. We didn't have the diagnostic support until 4.0 version, but yeah, this helps a lot in developer scenarios. Whenever you face issues in production, the first thing that we ask is the diagnostic. So JavaScript SDK supports diagnostic by default. You can enable or disable based on the condition flag that we have. With that, yeah, we will directly jump into the demo. And these are some of the prerequisites that you need to have if you're trying out JavaScript SDK, or even if you want to try out the quick start, you need to have the Node.js installed, and also probably Azure Cosmos DB emulator or the live account, and VS Code, any code editor that you prefer. You can navigate to our GitHub repo in order to see the code base, and you can install the SDK from Azure Cosmos DB npm package that we have published. So yeah, you can see the release version and everything from this. And if you want to go to specific version, you can install using the specific tag, as I mentioned before. With that, I won't take much time. I will hand it over to Aman to talk about the features in detail with the demo.
All right. Thanks to G. Aman, yeah, walk us through, I guess, a live demo here for what you want to show us today.
So, like we have built a sample app, or you could call it a demo app, like where we have built basically a movie finder app, where we will be ingesting some data into the Cosmos DB, and we will be encrypting some of those fields. We will be making an embedding out of some of the fields, and then finally try to query some data from there and try to see the results from there. So there are like different, all the components that we have added as part of E4, we have tried to incorporate and show, trying to show like how we all can use these features to build an end-to-end application. And so for that, like what we have done is like we have collected some raw movie data using AI. Like we have generated some sample data using AI, and it has different fields like title, year, genre, director, cast, synopsis, licensing, and all these things. And what we want to do is like we want to take all this data and bulk insert into our Cosmos DB. So like kind of like using our new bulk API, we want to show like how easy it is to use that API to insert all that data into the Cosmos DB. And if you want to encrypt, let's say, some of the fields into that in that container, what we can do is like we can define the encryption policy for that particular container. And as Saji mentioned, like even before it leaves the client, it all that data gets encrypted and get stored in an encrypted form into the container. And for example, like here we want to let's say encrypt the licensing field. So like all the contract ID and the partner name for that particular movie, let's say, would be encrypted and not be stored into the Cosmos DB in a plain text form, but rather be encrypted. And like once we have encrypted that and bulk inserted that, we want to move to the next stage where we will be using the change feed to read that data and see and showcase how easy it is to read data from the change feed. So it's like an infinite continuous iterator that keeps on checking periodically, like if there is any new insertion to that particular container, and if there is, like it will try to extract that out and then process it further and store it into a new container. And so this application that we have currently, I mean, what it will do is like it will try to periodically fetch the data and take out the synopsis string from this raw movie data that we have and send it over to an embedding model to generate vector out of it. So the end goal is to do full text search as well as a vector search on some of the fields that we have here. And so what we will be doing is like we'll be creating a container where we have a full text policy on some of the fields, like for example, title and the director name here, title and the director name here, and then some vector search policy on the synopsis, like the embedding that we finally generate, and then we will try to query some movie data, and hopefully that shows us the results that we expect. So let's dive. Let me do a code walkthrough, and serially, like we can walk through this.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the sample data that we have. Like it's a JSON, as Saji already told. Like we love JSON as JavaScript developers, so we have that in this format. And for example, like this is the movie that we have, and we want to basically encrypt this part. And like this is currently in a local system, so it is like unencrypted. But we want to store it into the Cosmos DB in an encrypted form, so we'll define the container policy for that. And this is the synopsis for which we will be generating the embedding, and these are the rest of the fields. For the title and the director, will be introducing full text search path on these on these paths. So let me just quickly show like how we can first of all create an encrypted container essentially. And for that, I mean, for JavaScript, like the way we have deviated from other SDKs is basically like for other SDKs, we have a separate package for the encryption. But in JavaScript, what we decided to do was like in a single like single Cosmos client, we have the option to enable or disable the encryption. So there is no separate package that we need to add for that. And the way to add this and invoke this encryption is basically like passes a key vault credential for that, and this basically signals to the SDK that okay, encryption needs to be enabled for that particular Cosmos client, and we do that. So the way encryption works is like there we have CMK and DEK. CMK is basically the customer managed key that resides in in their key vault, and which is used to encrypt, wrap or unwrap the DEK. DEK is basically the data encryption key, which is used to encrypt or decrypt the actual data. So the access to that key is always held by the customer, and that encrypted form of that particular key or the wrap form of that particular key is always stored into the Cosmos DB, which we can fetch and then try to communicate to the key vault with the credentials that the customer provide, and try to wrap or unwrap that key to further encrypt or decrypt the data that we want to store in the Cosmos DB. So like this that you see on the screen right now, like this is the simple way to create to signal to the SDK that okay, we need to enable the encryption in the client instance that we are creating. And once we have that this Cosmos client, encrypted Cosmos client, let me show you the encryption policy, and as well as the uh, uh, how we create that client encryption key. So once we have got the encrypted client, what we can do is like we define a client encryption key, which will be used to like encrypt or decrypt the data, and we mention okay which path, like where is the key vault path for that particular key, and all the like which algo we want to use, where it is residing, and all these things. We mention all this into this encryption key wrap metadata, and then we store then we create this key. So this is like a one-time process. Like for a database, a key would be unique, and we don't need to create it again and again. Just one key, and we will be we are good, and like that key would always be read from the backend once it is created. So now once that key is created, we want to define okay which path we want to encrypt, and which key we want to use, and which algo we want to use for that. So that this is the way to define that. Like we have defined okay that licensing we want to encrypt, and we want it to be deterministic or a randomized encryption. So we have chosen deterministic for now, and which algorithm we want to use for this, and what is the key ID that we want to use for this that we just created before this. And what this will do is like it will and we mention all this part into our client container definition, and just add all this up, and then send a request to the backend that okay, create this container. And once this container is created, what we can do is like after that we will move to the second part, that is bulk insertion of the data. And here in this bulk insertion, what we are doing is like uh, we take all that data and encrypt all that data, and then it simultaneously gets sent along to the backend in different batches. So this API that you see like execute bulk operation, it is as simple as like passing, just give us all that data into this operation input form, and internally it will figure out, okay, which paths or it all need to encrypt and everything. It will encrypt that first of all, and then send it along to the backend to be stored there. So let me just quickly fire this up so that we can see actually in the uh, live that how's data gets stored here. So I've it should take more than around a minute for it to complete.
Do you guys do it differently? Your SDK design is different than, say, the .NET and Java SDK, where they basically bulk enable the connection and then do the operations. You actually explicitly call a bulk operations.
Yeah, so it's not like a streamer API that we have. It's mostly like, okay, you give us all the data and we'll insert in, and then that operation will be finished in .NET. But we have is like it's a direct, it's a bulk mode enabled. So if any request it could combine, it will combine. But the design we went with was like not to do it as a streamer API, but rather a non-streamer API, so that like once you give us all the data, it's and once it is completed, that operation, like that bulk operator cannot be used once again. You'll need to fire a new call. So, I mean, there was a lot of discussion that we had internally, and we ultimately decided on this approach. And let me just quickly show you the how data is actually visible in Cosmos DB now. So, as we wanted to encrypt the licensing part, so here if you see like in the input data that we had, like they were plain simple strings, but here if they are encoded strings, and this data is like actually never visible to the Cosmos DB directly. So yeah, I mean, rest of the fields get stored up as it is, and licensing we wanted to encrypt, so these they get encrypted in this form. And yeah, I mean, bulk upload was completed, so it's very quick actually. Like, I mean, what we were able to achieve was almost a similar, like JavaScript being a single threaded application, but still because I mean, even after that we were able to almost achieve the performance of .NET, similar to .NET for our bulk API. So I think yeah, that was pretty good. And okay, so now like we have inserted the data, and now we want to modify this data using, let's say, change. Now coming to the second part, essentially, where uh, we now have all the data into our Cosmos DB, and we want to read that data using change feed, and then simultaneously send it along to the embedding model for vectors to be created for iSynopsis. So let me do a quick code walkthrough for that. And before that, okay, let me show you, okay, how we can define the vector policy and the full text policy for the container. So essentially, like this again goes part of that container definition only. That okay, like what is the partition key? So this remains the same. For the full text policy, what we have defined is I want to define a full text path on the title, and what would be the language for that in the director, and what would be the corresponding language for that, and then the vector embedding, like okay, at which particular path my embedding lies in the container. So this is like the embedding slash embedding. Like right now this path doesn't exist, but once we send it to the embedding model and get back some vectors, we will be storing that at this particular path, and this will again get added to the Cosmos tree. And then we define, okay, what kind of indexing we want for that particular vector. So like we have flat, quantized flat, and disk knn. So I mean, for this we have chosen quantized flat, but like we have feel free to choose anything else. So yeah, I mean, this is the way to create a container and define different policies on that. And coming to the part of reading data from the change feed. So like change feed has by default has two versions. Like one is latest version and another is all versions and deletes that I think got recently added. So we support both of them. And we also have like different starting point. Like if we want to start from a particular continuation token, or we want to start from the beginning, or any particular point in time. So I mean, depending on the feature wise, like which mode certain features are supported and certain are not. Uh, so like we can define all that into our change feed iterator options, and we can initialize this iterator. And what is happening in the code here is that it will, whatever page it fetches, like this max item count number of pages it fetches, it returns back to like it fetches that and returns a continuation token as well as the data. And we keep on using that continuation token to fetch the next pages, and then use that data that we got to generate embedding out of it. So let me just quickly go through the part like how we are creating the embedding. Like this is an Azure OpenAI model that we are using for this sample. And this input, in the input we basically pass them the string that we want to create a vector out of, and this Azure OpenAI model basically returns us those embeddings, and that embedding gets stored into that particular document, and then ultimately like we fire up return that document uh, to the Cosmos DB. So let me just quickly fire this up so that it could start processing all this data.
So you guys are you're sticking this in a different container, basically when you're
Yeah.
processing the data.
So for this, like what we have done essentially is like we don't, like in this new container, let's say that we don't want to use the licensing part, like we don't want to expose that even in the encrypted, like we don't want to store that. Rather, we want just the embeddings and all the information that is required just for searching. So let consider it as a situation that okay, one is just for the backend part, like where the data could be continuously added up, and then there is a change feed iterator, which basically reads that, modifies whatever it wants, and then store all that data into a new container for the customer. Like that is basically like a customer facing container, and the other one is a backend related container that you don't want to expose some certain parts there. So I mean, this is a change feed that keeps on going on, and I think it has almost like completed it there. Meanwhile, this is completed. Like if this still takes some time, we could go through the part where like we want to query the raw data and see okay that it actually was like some of that data was encrypted, but when we are trying to read that data back, it becomes decrypted. So let me just quickly fire this. Um, So what we are trying to do here is we have selected a movie name and we want to search on that. And when we read this back, what we will see is that that licensing and all those parts are basically unencrypted here. So the contract ID and the partner name that we see here, like in the backend, they were in the encrypted form. But when we try to read that back, so internally we figure out okay which particular parts needs to be decrypted. Then we fetch the key and then decrypt that particular part again. And for the when the customer read back that data, like it is completely in the unencrypted form there. So yeah. Uh, Coming back to the main part now. So I mean, this is a change feed that keeps on going on. It is not able to find any new results. So like it is periodically checking right now. Like every 10 seconds, it will fire a call to see okay if there are any new results in that particular container, and it could continue from that point. But like right now, it won't find any new one because we haven't inserted any new data there. So we could keep this change feed running, or let me just close this up and show okay how the data is now present in the Cosmos DB. And let me just refresh this. Okay, so now like now we have two container, one that contained raw data which had like encrypted licensing, and this new vector movie data that we just defined for our full text search and the vector search. And here we will see that okay we have removed that licensing field. The synopsis and all are still present, but apart from that, this embedding is also present now. So what this embedding is like, it's a semantic meaning of this synopsis that we want to have. And so like all the results from there got like all the data from there got copied here, and as well as like we have this embedding now, and now we are in a good shape I think to fire up some queries and see how our new query pipeline works, and also like what kind of results and what kind of queries we can make here.
Got it. Hey, do you guys support the new global secondary indexes that we announced at Build?
Not yet, Mark. It's in pipeline. It's in the road. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let me first show the syntax of how easy it is to write like queries using our SDK, and how we can enable this new query pipeline. So I think, yeah, let me first define like what this new query pipeline that we keep on talking about is. So earlier, like we had like the way our query pipeline worked before was that if we see this max item count that the customer used to pass, the SDK tried its best to achieve this particular number. For example, if it is not able to find this number till now, it would have made a few more calls to the backend to try to achieve this. number. But this sometimes actually led to RUs draining a bit, because calls were automatically getting fired to the backend to try to attain this particular number. But now with this new query pipeline, what we have done is we so there is actually one more field, like max degree of parallelism, that the customer can configure. So in the worst case scenario, what happens is, like, even if we are not able to achieve this max item count that the customer wants, but we have exhausted, like made the number of calls to be equal to the max degree of parallelism that we have. Even if we are not able to achieve the result by then, we just return an empty or a partial result. Like if it is a final result but a partial result, like we are not till five, let's say if three results were there, we would return those three, rather than making a few additional call to the backend to try to achieve this five, so that like the customer has more control over this, like if they want to continue further or not, rather than us draining up their RUs. So I mean, this flag helps us achieve that. But by default, we are still on the older behavior right now. But if someone wants to switch up to this new behavior, they can enable this enable query control flag, pass this just along into the query, and this will return us like internally it will switch to the newer pipeline, and we will get the results as expected. So yeah, now coming to the query part. Uh, let's say that I want to query like movies that had something related to World War, some World War related movies that we have in our database. So what we will do is this World War first needs to be converted into an embedding. So we'll again throw it back to the that model that we had, and we'll attain the embedding for that. And then we'll simply call this we'll simply write up this query that select top five title that we have, and we need to order it by vector distance of embedding and corresponding to this embedding. So it will basically internally in the backend it will return us okay, these are the vector scores for each vector distances for each of the elements that we have, and internally we'll be sorting them out in our SDK and return the best possible results. Okay, that which are the top five results that we have, and we'll be returning that back to the client. So let me just quickly fire this up. Right now, let's write this query. And so I mean, in the database, like we had some duplicate entries also, and so I mean, it returned us five entries: Forgotten War, Battle of the Wilderness, Dunkirk, Whispers of War, and all these things. So I mean, if we go and correspondingly check the synopsis for these movies, like they would have some relation to the input string that we had. So it returned us those results. So now let's do a bit better than this. Like I think we can do a bit better than this. So let's include some full text search into this. Like right now in the previous one, it was just vector search that we were doing. Now let's add some full text search also into this one. And what we want to do is wherever the full text contains let's say Steven Spielberg, and I just mentioned like half of the value, and I want to full text search on that. And along with that, also want to do let's say vector distance. And so this is the kind of the query I will be writing, like select top three title from C where full text contains director as the Spielberg, and the vector distance for that particular embedding. So let's quickly fire up this query and see how we can utilize that. Yeah, so I mean, we got some movies now, some better results. Like for example, if I wanted to search for that particular director, we got like Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, and all these movies we got in the response back now. And if you want to do even further, like we also support reciprocal rank fusion. We support weighted RRF, weighted reciprocal rank fusion, where we can combine like different entities. For example, I want to get the final list order based on the vector distance as well as the full text score as well as some other fields. So for like we our SDK also support that functionality, weighted RRF as well as the normal RRF, and this is the kind of the syntax that we need to write to do reciprocal rank fusion on different results. So let me just quickly show this up. Yeah, I think this is the last thing in this demo. Let me just quickly run this query. Yeah, I mean, again, like, so what it did internally was like it got ranked. So internally, what we did for this RRF query is basically like we got the scores and ranking for each of the individual. Like, first of all, we individually calculated the rank for on based on each of the parameters that we had, like vector distance and the full text score. And then what we did was like internally we calculated an RRF score and calculated a final rank based on which we return the output back to the customer. So I mean, this is a very small data set that we had, and I mean, but if this is actually really useful, like if we try to comb through like millions of documents. So I mean, in interest of time, we just had a small database here, but yeah, I mean, this could scale really well, and yeah. So
Great. This is cool, Aman. Love it. You guys are keeping up with the Joneses on all the vector text search stuff. It's a never-ending moving of the goalpost around here. It seems with all the new features getting added to the platform and to our query engine, and indexing engine and storage engine and everything else, all the time in there. So I think it's great the work you guys are doing. I'm really excited about the bulk in there and just continued perf. That's shocking that you said that you're approaching kind of .NET SDK speeds with JavaScript SDK. I'm gonna check with Kieran on the team see what he thinks
definitely,
of that.
definitely, yeah. I mean, we were also surprised when we saw the results. Like when I mean, we had a few iterations internally, and we were not still happy with the performance. So I mean, we tried to do the best we could.
No,
Uh,
that's great.
yeah.
And it's definitely getting increased in usage and growth. And the fact that you've got people that are contributing and building and contributing to projects as well is a really good sign.
Yep.
Within JavaScript community, that seems to be kind of a marker for health. Is people are going and creating new projects, whether it's Orange or tools or whatever, built based upon your work and your SDK, and then building and adding more value to the community from that. So I think that's fantastic. So anything new, I guess, upcoming you want to, like, we got about like 2-3 minutes. You got anything you want to give us a sneak peek on, Saji and Aman, or you kind of want to keep it quiet, or you could just say, hey, go look at the issues list.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to cover some of the important tips that anyone should follow when they're using the JavaScript SDK. Mark, if you can switch
Oh
the
yeah, sure.
slides.
Let me add you back here. Sure.
Yep. So these are some of the important tips to remember. Make sure you have the latest version of the SDK. That's quite important because we announce what are the features and we make it stable with the latest version. And make sure you have the application and also the Azure Cosmos DB account in the same region in order to avoid latency issues. That's one important tip that customers tend to miss in their prod environment. So that's one other important thing. And use singleton, as we always say,
Yep.
even with JavaScript SDK. And yeah, enabling diagnostic, this hasn't been there before, but with V4, you can enable diagnostics in order to identify issues and failures. So these are some important tips. And also we have a documentation as well, so you can follow the
Just for
rest of
tuning,
the.
by the way, like the diagnostics and all that stuff in there. It, like I had Justine on, she was talking about global secondary index, and just a lot of information you can get out of those diagnostics can help you kind of tune the
Yep.
queries you've got in there. So anyway, go ahead, keep going. I don't want to stop you.
I think on the next steps, make sure you build apps with JavaScript SDK, and you can also publish into a gallery if you have any important apps to share. And yeah, other thing is we value a feedback. So if you want any new features on the JavaScript SDK or even on the integrations that you're interested in, you can write to us and make sure to give the feedback using the survey that we have. And yeah, join with our next episodes, especially focusing on the JavaScript topics. And you can always reach out to us, to the engineering team, and also to the PMs by using this email. With that, we would like to close this session. And thanks, Mark, for
Yeah,
hosting us
so
today.
just want to put up some more links for folks here. A blog post announcement that we released at Build. So if you want to read about all the stuff you just saw here today and maybe a little bit more, and links to other stuff, come check out AKAMS Azure-Cosmos DB-JavaScript-4.0. And then the sample and demo you saw today, if you want to give that a try, check this out here, aka.ms/cosmos-js-v4-sample. And you can download that and try out our new JavaScript SDK 4.0. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining. Aman, congratulations, your first episode of Cosmos DB TV. Sajeet's kind of an old veteran. He's been on the show a number of times now, but now you've got one under your belt. Hope to see you back again really soon. Definitely on the best practices when you guys come back. Come back and join us for that. So, all right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Great show. And thanks for sharing all the latest and greatest on the JavaScript SDK 4.0. And we'll see you all next time.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.